Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back. We're going to hear evidence from a fresh witness this afternoon, Mr. Patrick Jones. So my first task is to see whether he is there and can hear me and see me. Hello, Mr. Jones.
Hello, I can hear you and see you.
Very good. Thank you very much. Can I just ask you, do you have a full screen picture?
I do, yes.
Oh, good, because the previous witness had a bit of trouble with that. I just wanted to check that. Now, you should have on the screen in front of you the words of the affirmation which we ask witnesses to make. Do you have it there?
I do.
Could I trouble you then, please read the affirmation out?
Yeah, I do solemnly, sincerely, and truly declare that I affirm that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Good, thank you very much indeed. Now, before you start giving evidence, there are one or two things we need to cover. Just housekeeping matters, really. Can you confirm for me that you're alone in the room from which you're giving evidence?
I am alone, yeah.
Thank you. Can you confirm that you have no documents or other written materials with you?
I have nothing. No, I have no documents, no written materials.
Very good. And can you also confirm that your mobile phone is in another room and that you don't have any electronic device with you that's capable of receiving messages?
Yeah, I've got nothing in here with me. Everything's elsewhere.
Very good. Thank you very much indeed. Now, just I hope we're not going to have trouble with sound or vision. We haven't had very much trouble so far, but if there is a difficulty, what I'll do is to call for a short break and we'll sort it out and then get back to you when we're ready. We'll have a short break during the afternoon, somewhere round about 3:15. So you'll be ready for that if you need. But if you need an additional break at any time, just indicate and we'll try and accommodate you. All right.
Okay. Yeah.
Is there anything you'd like to bring to my attention or any questions you'd like to ask before we start?
No, I think I'm okay. Thank you.
Ready to go. Right. Well, now, Ms. Sullivan, I understand you're going to examine this witness.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So when you're ready, off you go. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Jones. Before we start, could you just confirm again that you can see me and hear me?
I can hear you and see you quite clearly.
Excellent. Well, can I start by thanking you for attending this public inquiry to come and give your evidence? It's very much appreciated. If you have any difficulty understanding any of the questions I'm going to ask, please do just say that and I'll ask it again or put it a different way. And finally, before I start, just a reminder that if you could keep your voice up so that the transcriber, who is also on the hearing, can take a note, and you could not nod or shake your head, but say yes or no when you're answering. That would be very helpful.
Okay, understood.
Thank you. Mr. Jones, you've provided some written answers in response to questions sent to you by the inquiry. Could I please take you to those? They'll appear on your screen and they are at SEF 6075. And you can see in the top left-hand corner, hopefully, it says just under the inquiry header, please find highlighted text as answers to the best of my knowledge and recollection. Patrick Jones, 10th of November 2019. Can you see that?
I can, yes.
So although that document's not signed, can you confirm that represents your answers to the questions that the inquiry put to you in that letter?
I would believe that one. I mean, I can't tell from that part, that section of it, but
page 2, please, just so Mr. Jones can see.
Yeah, that's mine. Seems silly, but I was having trouble with my PDF editor at the time. That's why it's in such a state like that.
That's not a problem, Mr. Jones. Have you read that document and your answers recently?
I read it a couple of months back, a few weeks back. Yeah, I have revisited it since I did it originally. Yes.
And so, could you confirm that the answers that you've given there are true and accurate?
Yes, I still stand by everything I answered there. Yes.
Have you discussed your answers to those questions or your evidence generally with anyone before coming here today?
No.
Okay. I'm going to ask you then a few questions about your background, we're going to focus then on 2014, and in particular, the work you did for Simco in relation to 2 tests carried out by Celotex at the BRE in February in 2014. So starting with your background, in 2014, you were a self-employed cladding installer, yes?
That's correct, yes.
And if we could go back to your statement at SEF 6075 on page 2. And zoom in on question 2. And I think as much as we can on the yellow highlighted text. We asked you there about your previous experience, and you've answered that you had been working on numerous rain screen cladding contracts nationwide since 1999. Can I take it that in terms of your own work on those contracts, that would be installation of the cladding?
Yeah, that's correct, yes.
And can you remember what kinds of rain screen cladding you had worked on?
Very, very numerous. A lot of, in the first few years, I did a lot of just the substrate, which was the LSF and the, and particle board. But there's so many different products. I did quite a lot of work on Trespa and Resoplan, as in high pressure laminates. So many various different products, so many.
Had you worked on any projects that involved buildings over 18 metres in height by 2014?
Can't recall. I might well have done. I've not done too many high-rise buildings, so I don't really think I did. It was mainly hospitals and offices and schools. In the early years, I didn't do any high-rise stuff.
And I think that's now gone from your screen, but you also said in your answer to that question that you had installed, there we go, it's right at the end of your highlighted text.
Yeah.
You'd installed various products at testing centres for just different testing regimes.
Yeah. To elaborate on that, is that what you're asking me? I've been a fixer for a long time. It was only I started cladding in 1999 or thereabouts, but before that I was shop fitting and ceiling installing, internal installing, and I used to get the jobs of doing testing for acoustic tests and fire tests for different products, really.
Okay, that's partly what I wanted to ask you. Can I just start? Which testing centres were you familiar with?
I've been to Warrington and Cardington and Wintec, which is Cannock Way. I'm not sure. Yeah, Wintec.
Had you by 2014, before the Celotex tests, been familiar with the BRE?
I have been to BRE. I can't recall that. I have been to BRE a couple of times, whether it was that one or not. I don't know if it was before or after that test. I really couldn't answer that.
Okay. How many times do you think you had been?
I think I've been to BRE on another test, although I can't really recall what.
If it helps you at all, the BRE is based in Watford. Does that help you with how often you might have been there or when?
No, I'll say no. I recall the BRE, well, from the time I was there. But I think I might have been in a different building at the BRE at another time for another test. I think it was years prior. I think it was an acoustic test for ceiling panels. That's what I think I've been to the BRE one time before, but that was in the fire test hall. I think that was the only time I've been there for that purpose.
I see. You mentioned that you, as well as acoustic tests, you had carried out fire tests by this point. Can you remember what kind of fire tests those were?
It was a fire test it was at Cardington, and it was for Cape Marine.
Was it a large-scale fire test, a BS 8414 test, or something else?
I really don't know. I'll say I've no knowledge of the test. I'll say they just instruct me as to what to install, meticulously, and I install it. I had no knowledge of the test that was, that was there.
Yes, I'm going to come to that. I think in your written answers you said, and I don't think we need to go to it, but we can if you want to. You said that you were unaware of BS 8414 in 2013. Does that sound right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yes.
Yeah. So just to be completely clear, before February 2014, did you have any knowledge of what BS 8414 was?
No.
And you were contracted by Simco to carry out the installation work for the test for Celotex in February 2014, is that right?
Yes, that's correct, yeah.
And if we could call up page 2 of your statement. It's SEF, oh, it's coming. In your answer to question 1, the second half of the sentence, you say that you would probably have been in contact with John Simmons or Graham.
Yeah.
Is that Graham Smith of Simco?
It would have been Graham Smith, yes.
Had you worked for Simco before February 2014?
Yes.
Do you know roughly how often?
No, I've been involved with those people for a number of years, not in the guise of Simco, but in another cladding company called ECL Limited, and I've just known those people for a while, so they know me.
And what kind of jobs had you been working on them with as ECL?
Cladding installer. That's who I started cladding installing with in 1999.
Right. Can you remember when Simco first contacted you about installing the test rig for the February 2014 test?
No, I can't remember that. No, it wouldn't have been far. I think I would be working for them at the time, although I can't remember where or which job. I mean, I've not looked into that. I suppose I could find out through past records, but I would have been working for them. Normally, the case will be they phone me up and say, "Will you go here?" And I'll say yes or no, and that was it. But it wouldn't have been long before, I wouldn't have thought. Generally, there's no lead-in time or anything like that usually.
Can you remember, did they call you up on this occasion?
I really can't remember. I would have thought so. Very little was done email, always back then. So yeah, they would have telephoned to me.
I appreciate you've said you can't recall, but do you remember anything about what you were told about what work they wanted you to do before you got there? No,
they'll say just go to the BRE. Someone will meet you there, and that's it. That's basically it, really. That's all the information you would generally get. So they'd give me the address and the time and the date, and say, turn up. Everything else will be there, and there'll somebody there to meet you. Somebody will meet there.
Could we go back to question 3 of your statement? You say, I recall it was mentioned that the test was for an over 18-metre install criteria, but I had no more understanding or involvement in any testing particulars.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's correct.
Sure. Can you remember who it was who mentioned that it was for over 18-metre installation?
Yeah, it was John Roper.
Okay, so this isn't referring to a conversation you had with Simco. This is a conversation with Celotex, is it?
This is a conversation with Celotex. For that particular job, I had very little involvement at all with Simco on that, on that job. They phoned me and asked me to go there, which was nothing unusual, and I went there, met with John Roper, and that was it. And until I wanted payment from Simco for the work, I'd hardly any contact with them at all. I think I asked for I think I might have phoned them or emailed them asking for the drawings on the first day or the second day, and other than that, I don't think Simco were particularly involved at all.
So turning to John Roper and the contact you had with him, if we can scroll down slightly in that document to question 5. Thank you. You say in the second sentence there, the process was what you've just told us. I was asked by Simco, I don't recall who, to attend the BRE and meet someone who transpired to be John Roper.
Yeah, exactly, yes.
And was that the first meeting you had with John Roper at the BRE?
Yeah, I'd never met him before that point.
Had you had any contact with anyone from Celotex before that point?
No, I don't think so. Possibly, like I say, it's I've been cladding for 4 years then, but not that I'm aware of, not particularly, no.
And can you remember, did John Roper explain that Celotex were testing an installation product to you?
Yes.
And what did he tell you about the product, if you can remember?
Nothing really. I mean, obviously I was aware of Celotex because we install it. I installed it all over all over the place on various different jobs. But I just that was a new product. Actually, He didn't say that it was a new product. He just said that it was a test to achieve over 18 meters, which that's as far as that's as much information I was told really.
Did he explain anything about why they were testing to over 18 meters to you, or just the fact?
No, obviously I understood through just general knowledge that that it up to 18 meters was a specific, you had to have a specific test to install over 18 meters. Other than that, so if this product passed the criteria, then they could sell it above 18 meters. And obviously, that's the reason for it. That's as much as I understood.
And was that just general knowledge you'd picked up on the job, that there was some testing criteria for above 18 meters?
Yes.
But you told us you knew there was a test, but you didn't know anything about what test it was.
No, I was just. I mean, that is as much information as I would have on that. I know that some products, they're only classified up to 18 meters, and things above 18 meters is a different criteria classification. So, other than that, I've got what test was involved, or I don't know. I could say BS 8414 now, and various others that I'm aware of now. At the time, that's it.
We're going to turn now to that test, and I'm going to ask you some questions about what you can remember about the installation. The test was carried out on the 14th of February 2014. Do you remember how long it took you to put up the rig from start to finish?
Not exactly, but I wouldn't have thought any more than 2 days, 3 days maybe, I would have thought.
Were you installing the materials for the February test by yourself?
I believe so. I think I had somebody with me at some point who I can't remember who they were, just because of the weight of the panels, but I can't remember who they were.
We're going to look at the drawings that you were given to help you with installing that. So if we could go to BRE 405422. This is an email from Luke Cresswell at Simco. It's an email to Phil Clark, and I think we can see he's copied in, I think it's your personal email address, so it's been partially redacted.
Yep.
And he says there, unfortunately, our site guys have turned up without drawings. Could you print off the attached for them? And there are 2 attachments. And just to help your memory, if we can just quickly look at the drawings which were attached, that's BRE 405423. So you had these. Do you recognise that?
Not specifically, because obviously you can imagine it. I've seen thousands and thousands of drawings, but yeah, they look. Yeah, I don't specifically recognise them from that time, but yeah, I would say that they're. Yeah, they're in. Yeah, I would say that they are probably the ones that were there, yes.
The other drawing that was attached was at BRE 405424. So if we could just call that up too. And same question, can you remember this specifically, or?
I can't remember the specific drawing, but it looks totally in keeping with that test rig. I recall the layout of it. I mean, that layout would fit that test rig. So yes, I would say that probably is the drawing for that area and that test rig. I mean, looking back at the photographs that I had, it's that is the layout. You know, as near as.
Well, we've seen from the email we were just looking at that Luke Cresswell asked Phil Clark at the BRE to print these out for you. And I don't think we need to go to it, but Mr. Clark has told us, and for the record, it's BRE 405768 at page 36, that he did print those out. And as far as he knows, those were the drawings that you used to construct the rig. Yeah,
I would agree with that. Oh, there would have been no. I must have had those drawings from Phil Clark because, you know, otherwise I wouldn't have been able to build it. Because, you know, I'm not saying Simco's involvement was very little, so I must have had those drawings because no one else visited. So yes.
Can you remember, were those the only two drawings you had?
Yes, I don't. Yeah, nobody give me any more now.
And were you given any other documents to help with the installation?
I really can't recall. I may have had product specific for the actual fire barrier. I know that a man did turn up and show us the correct application of the fire barrier. I think it's Sidewise, but I can't remember his name and I can't remember which company it was from. I just recall a man that John Roper introduced one morning and he showed us the correct application and the correct fitting procedure of that particular product.
In terms of the product specification, could you just help me by explaining how is it that would have been helpful for you as something to have?
If it's so not the product technical details, but the install details, sometimes they are. If it's a different product, generally everything's, you know, it's very similar install criteria, but you know, something might be, you know, it might be a particular washer, or they might want the fixings fixed at a particular height or centers. Sometimes I don't recall anything, but there may have been something.
Is that based on a sense of what normally happens?
Yeah.
Or, so it's not a memory, or it's
just what normally happens. Yeah. If it's a different product, or something that needs to be installed in a particular way, as in a test, then generally they would cover all bases and say, you know, these centers need to be at 300, 100 this way. So you generally would get a specification, an install specification sheet. Although I can't really recall having one.
I just wanted to ask you a couple of questions about this person, possibly from Siderise, who came along with John Roper one day. Was that before the February test?
I can't remember which test it would have been at. It probably would have been at the first test, because I should imagine it was during or prior to the first test.
But that's on the basis that makes sense, rather than that you have a recollection that that's the case. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, and I'll say he would have come in, and yeah, there's no point in coming after the first test. Really, he would have arrived at the first test.
And I know you've said that you can't remember who it was or what company they were from, but you have also said that it might have been Siderise. Could you just help with what's led you to think that?
I think the fire barrier that we was installing was Siderise. It's a Siderise type. I can't recall the brand, but it's a Siderise style. So, but I'm not actually sure of the fire barrier type or manufacturer. But you know, it was whoever was supplying it. I really don't know the answer to that one.
You said you came with John Roper. Was John Roper with you every day when you were doing the installation?
No, most days, but not every day, no.
And how long would he stay for?
Good few hours, generally.
And was he giving you any verbal instructions about how they wanted the rig put together?
Yes.
Can you remember anything he said?
Not specifically.
Was he effectively expecting you to just build and install the system according to the drawings that you've been given?
Yes. I should imagine, obviously, if it's a test to try and it's a test to try and achieve certification, I understood it. I mean, it's not the first time. It's obviously somebody from the company's got a massively vested interest to ensure that the test is as accurate and as it's installed as accurately as possible. That's what I understood he was there for.
So it's your understanding he was there to oversee your work?
Yeah, oversee the quality control, yes.
Yeah. And apart from John Roper, and also you've mentioned this man possibly from Siderise, did anyone else give you any instructions about how to install the rig? I
think we may have had light guidance from the BRE staff themselves, just to say, just because obviously they know their test rigs. But I do remember people saying, you fix to this and fix to this section and fix to that section. But other than that, no.
So when you say light guidance,
as in, let's say that they are fully familiar with their test rig and that they just outlined the procedure of, you fix to this and then, fix to these beams and fix to this columns, etc. And then when you get to that stage, well, obviously they're watching. It's inside their hall. So I say when you get to that stage, you stop, and then we'll come and install our sensors as such, and then we continue.
You say they're watching. Was there someone from the BRE there present at all the time?
It's inside their hall. There wasn't somebody standing watching over us, but obviously there are people around. I mean, there's several, probably 6, 8 test rigs in that one hall in question. So obviously they're working on other rigs and doing other things and around. There's people around all the time, mostly.
I wanted to ask you about that actually. When you were installing the rig, were you the only person working on, as in, was it just your rig which was having work done, or were there work going on the other rigs in the burn hall?
We were the only people actually installing on the rigs, but there were people coming in and looking and setting up. I think it was mainly the BRE people, but there are other visitors. There were no tests going on, and there was no other installers at the time.
I'm going to come on to some questions about the BRE's processes and procedures, but just before I do, just one last question about the man maybe from Siderise. Do you know if he might have been Chris Mort? Does that name mean anything to you?
Mort? I really can't recall, but Mort could possibly be it.
But you can't remember?
No, I really can't remember his name, no. I remember what he looked like, but other than that, no.
Are you able to give us a sort of general description?
At that time, he would have been early 50s, I would have thought. Quarter stocky, rounded in men, slightly balding, wearing glasses. Other than that, no. I just remember because he was showing me the thing how to install how to bend the tabs on the fire barrier. One way, one the other. It was a different project that I hadn't. I was not totally familiar with, and he says, "We'd like you to install it in this manner. Do this, do this, do this, etc."
And just before I move on, was it just the fire barriers that you had? It wasn't any other component where someone came in to walk through like that?
No, it was just the fire barrier system.
Okay, I'm going to move on to some questions about what you might have seen about how the BRE worked in February 2014. So at that time, when you were installing that first test, did anybody tell you anything about what standard practices were for the BRE?
Sorry, could you rephrase that? In what way?
But did anyone say to you, look, these are our standard operating procedures and this is how we're going to be doing things, so you know what's going on?
Yes, they would have. Yeah, we were at I'm sure we had an induction, yes. I'm sure we had a verbal induction to work in that area.
Was that administered by a member of BRE staff?
Yes, it would have been, yes.
Can you remember what that induction covered?
No, I think it was mainly just a general induction, as in, you know, the fire escape route procedures, and we couldn't be in there. I do remember that we couldn't be in there when there was a test going on. So they had other tests set up in there. So, you know, there was a period of hours where we wouldn't be able to work. So we, you know, finish our work by this time. Other than that, no, I don't think any more than that, no.
I think the BRE have explained that they would have done a health and safety induction at least.
Yes.
Is it that sort of thing that you're remembering?
Yes.
Do you remember anyone telling you the BRE had processes in place to check and record the installation and design of the cladding systems that would be put up?
I don't recall it, but they must have done, because I am aware. So somebody must have told us. Yes.
We've heard a bit from Phil Clark about that, so I'm going to go through that, what he's told us. But before I do that, could you just tell us anything you can remember about what you must have been told, or what you know now know?
Yeah. Well, in that particular test rig, I was told the location of the fire, and you know where that would be, and where the sensors would be, because obviously we had to avoid fixing points as to where the sensors required. That was it. And I was told that, you know, it had to reach a specific duration, of which I can't recall. You know, it sort of things, you know, meant little to me at the time. And you know, that was it. And then we would complete it, or we would partially complete it. They would install their sensors, then we would complete it, then they would test it, and they would test it during the test and after the test, and record it and record everything. And you know, obviously I must have been told that. I didn't just guess it. So yeah.
When you say we had to reach a specific duration, are you talking about how long you had to put the rig together, or are you talking about the test that was going to be carried out?
No, the test. Obviously, I was aware that, you know, it had to, you know, it says, you know, what's it for? It, you know, it has to reach a specific amount of time at a specific temperature.
And were you told who at the BRE you should raise any problems or questions with?
I must have been, but you know, they were just said to come and see us. There was an office upstairs, and they said, come and see us up there, you know, if you need anything.
Do you remember who that was?
No, but I'll say, if Phil Clark, again, if Phil Clark's got grey hair, I really can't remember his name, terrible with names, but if Phil Clark's got grey hair, that would have been Phil Clark.
Did you get the impression that it was the person whose office it was who was saying, just go
There were
up?
several people in that office, but yes.
Okay. Could we go to BRE 405768 at page 8, please? This is from Mr. Clark's witness statement, which he's given to the inquiry. And you can see under question 2B, which is in bold and underlined, there's paragraph 38. And he says, the client/project officer works with sponsor to ensure the system is correctly installed. All required information regarding materials fixing and names of materials has been provided. And then in paragraph 39, he goes on to explain some of the checks that the BRE carry out. So first of all, did you understand that there was a person who was the BRE project officer or generally in charge for this test?
Well, yeah, obviously I was aware that there was somebody that was in charge, and there was one particular man who was quite obviously the man in charge. I would guess from context that it was Phil Clark, but and I was aware that, you know, they would be testing and measuring and samples of everything. Yeah, but he did have a lot of, obviously I was there installing, and so details like that, he would have been speaking to John Roper. He would have spoken to us briefly. Obviously, he did speak to us, but you know, things like this, I'm sure he was talking to John Roper.
Well, could we go to page 42 in this statement? Paragraph 177. And he's described here that he would have taken notes, photographs, and had email correspondence with the client and the contractor. He's also then goes on, this would have involved day-to-day checking of the system and ensuring the safe working practice of the contractors working on site. That would obviously be you, wouldn't it?
Yep.
Do you remember Phil Clark, or indeed anyone from the BRE, carrying out health and safety checks?
Yeah, definitely. There was people, like I said, there were definitely people around watching and looking and recording and photographing, you know, at various intervals during the install, you know, on the rig that we were on and other rigs. I'll say there were people around.
So when you say recording, what do you mean by that? Do you mean taking notes?
Yeah, definitely taking notes. There was people walking around. The rig has got a scaffold, a raised scaffold all the way around the back of it, you know, and a stairwell. And there were people on there while I was on the machine on the front. There's definitely people on the back there. You know, say obviously I wasn't paying too much attention to what they were doing, but for sure there were people walking around taking notes and measurements and installing, you know, the sensors. Yeah, there was definitely people recording what was occurring for sure.
And were they, you mentioned that they were taking photos at intervals. Do you remember Phil Clark or anyone else from the BRE taking photos of the components before you started putting them up?
I can't recall that now. I can't actually remember seeing anything like that now.
And in terms of the photos that they were taking, when you say at intervals, how often would that be?
I don't know. I really can't remember. I do remember that there were, you know, there were people in there with. There were people photographing, but not sales. I was just installing.
And when you got there, where did you get the materials from? Were they in a store or a pile? How did you find them?
Just some were just inside the doorway. There's a big roller shutter door on the front. Some materials were inside, and some materials were outside, and some were delivered during the process.
Well, we might come back to that for the May test, but did anyone check those materials at the BRE?
I don't know that. I'm only assuming. Yes, I'm sure they would have done, but I can't recall actually seeing it. I couldn't evidence that. No.
And you don't recall seeing anyone checking them against the drawings or specification or anything like that?
I can't specifically recall that. No.
If we could go back to Mr. Clark's statement at page 9. Paragraph 40, Mr. Clark gives a list of what he says is the BRE's general practice. He tells us that generally BRE staff undertake a visual inspection of the constructed test rig. So do you remember anyone visually inspecting it after you'd finished building?
Specifically what they were doing, I couldn't say, but yeah, I do remember people, like I said previously, I do remember people measuring, you know, and ensuring that the work that we'd done, you know, yeah, again, exactly, so that the criteria is correct, like the width of the opening and the height of the head of the hearth and the height of the. So I do remember the height of the head of the hearth section being critical, and I remember the height of the rig being critical. So they must have gone and measured it, but I can't really recall anyone specifically doing it. But they, you know, I vaguely remember BRE staff measuring things.
So sorry, you think they must have been measuring something. Can you remember what they were measuring?
No, exactly what they were measuring, I can't recall now.
Do you remember anyone measuring the width of the cladding panels?
No, I can't recall that, no.
Do you remember anyone taking a record of the system as it had been built up?
Not specifically, but as I said previously, there were people in there photographing at various points while I was installing, so I would assume that they had a record. I just understood that they took a record of, you know, at intervals all the way through the whole process.
And did they seem to be regularly spaced intervals?
I can't recall that, no.
Did anyone from the BRE undertake any checks to ensure that the system was being correctly installed, or were you just left to it?
No, they did, as I said, they were there, they were checking, yes, they definitely were checking.
And do you recall anyone checking or comparing the rig against the drawings that had been provided and which you had copies of?
I can't specifically remember that, no.
And when you got to the end of your task of installing, did you have to tell someone from the BRE that you were finished?
I think we did. I think we did tell more. I can't remember whether it was specified or whether we just said it's, you know, more out of courtesy that we're now leaving the building.
Do you remember?
They were there, and if I remember rightly, that their office on the first or second floor of the hall overlooks the whole area, so anyone in that office would be able to see what we were doing anyway. So, and as I said, there were people around most of the time.
Could I just clarify something? You just said there was an office on the first or second floor.
Yeah.
You've obviously told us there was a walkway running around. Was it your impression that there were 2 floors then, and the office was on one of those?
It's quite a high-rise hall. Obviously, it must be at least 6 to 10 meters, maybe higher, to the roof. And I'm sure that the office is on the second, or sorry, it could be the first floor. I can't recall, but it's definitely higher up. It overlooks the hall, the fire test hall. Or if I'm recalling correctly.
I see. We were just talking about whether you alerted anyone when you'd finished. Was there any sort of formal handover process or formal sign-off?
I can't remember.
Do you remember if anyone checked the rig before it was handed over back to the BRE?
I can't remember that. Like I said, I was fully aware that they were recording and testing and watching everything that we did. So, you know, I just took it as understood it that they knew, and they knew when we was ready. We did definitely tell people that we'd finished them when we left, and you know, and is everything correct? You know, we were talking to the staff and various members. You know, so yeah.
I think you said earlier that there was definitely someone, whoever it was, who, you know, was the guy in charge.
Yes.
Was he somebody you alerted to the fact that you had finished, whether out of courtesy or because you had to?
If he was there, yes, it would have been the first port of call, because obviously he was the man dealing.
And so, just to be clear, it's your evidence that in addition to John Roper of Celotex, the BRE were also carrying out checks whilst you were installing the rig in 2014 and maybe after.
Yes, I understood that they were testing and checking. Yes, or checking and measuring. Sorry. Yes.
Did they make the BRE or Celotex make any comments in relation to the installations you were doing?
Can't really recall that they did. I think they specified it accurately enough, and the drawings must have been accurate enough for us to build it how they wanted the first time. They may well have done. I can't remember that. I can't remember them making any verbal amendments during it.
Was it your understanding that the BRE and Celotex were both aware of what was on the rig in February 2014?
Definitely, yes.
would it have been possible, given what you've described about people being around in and out all the time, for you to have installed something without the BRE or teletext note was there?
No.
And I think you've told us that that was the first time you had been at the BRE to install a fire test. So as far you wouldn't have had anything to compare it against to know whether that was normal, would you?
Sorry, can you rephrase that? Sorry.
Since it was the first time you were there,
yeah,
you couldn't say whether the level of checking and the level of activity was normal for the BRE or not, could you?
No, I couldn't say that. But having done similar tests on different things, not specifically for fire, it's that's generally part of the course. So obviously the client's got a vested interest in it. It's done to its best capabilities, so that it's accurate, so that it's got its best chance of passing. Then the people who record it, obviously, they have to ensure that it's done correctly, otherwise the test would be invalid, wouldn't it? So yeah, so everyone's checking, and I understand that just from common sense. But as for the BRE's exact procedure, no, I've got nothing to gauge their own procedure.
How did it compare with your experience of other tests?
Very similar. Very similar.
Okay, I want to now move on to the second test, which is in May 2014. I'm afraid some of these questions are going to be pretty similar, but it's important that we understand from you what you can remember. So I think I'm right, you were employed by Simco again to install the test sample in May 2014, right?
Yes.
And who was it, can you remember, who contacted you on that occasion to tell you there was going to be a second test?
I can't recall that, sorry.
Do you remember when roughly that might have been?
No, I don't know, other than looking back through the possible emails, but no, look, generally they don't give you much warning. I never got much warning, sorry. It would have been a week at the very most.
And is it right that this time there was somebody else was employed to go along and help you with the installation?
Yes.
And we have that. I think Phil Clark has told us in his witness statement that he thinks Wayne Jones.
Wayne Jones probably was with me. Might have been the first time, I believe. Wayne Jones is my brother, who I generally worked with all of the time. But one time he wasn't there with me.
Well, can we look? It might just help you if we look at Mr. Clark's statement where he says this. If we could go to BRE 405768 at 65. That's page 65. And then it is right at the top of that page. It's the end of paragraph 266. So actually, maybe if we could go back a page to the bottom of page 64. This, you can see in context that Mr. Clark's talking here about the May test, because he says that the installation was undertaken by the installers of the first system, which has already happened. And then over on page 65, he says, it appears from what's on the BRE's files that the work was undertaken by you and Wayne Jones. So can you remember whether it was the first test or the second test? Where
I think Wayne was with me on the first test and then not on the second test, because as I said, Simco sent somebody else to assist me with the lift and the panels because they were heavy. They were 9 or 12 mil panel, and it was like 90 kilo, I think. So I can't remember that man. I can't remember who he was.
So you think you had somebody?
Wayne was with me for the first test, I believe.
Thank you. So you had someone with you for the second test, but not Wayne Jones. Is that right?
I think so, yes.
And were they with you throughout when you were installing the second test, or were they, like the first test, just there to help you moving the panels?
think on the second test, they were there. Wayne was with me. He would have been with me throughout. We worked together for years. So yeah, on the second test, whoever they sent, they would have been there in place of Wayne. I don't think Wayne wanted to go. I can't quite recall. It's that long ago, but yeah, they would have been there installing with me.
And were you given an induction or any explanation of standard procedures when you arrived for that second installation in May?
I would have thought so. It's normal process to have a health and safety induction everywhere on every site before any work starts. So I can't recall it vaguely, but I'm sure I must have been given something.
I've got some questions about the design of that second test. I realise, you weren't involved in the design process, but just to help your memory with what it was, if we could look at CEL 30010052 at page 13. This is Jonathan Roper of Celatex's witness statement. And if we look at paragraph 5.32 in the middle of the page, he's explaining here the discussions that took place internally at Celatex about prior to the second test about what design changes they might make. And you can see after the small Roman numerals 2, he talks about increasing the panel thickness and using a double panel system on the fire barrier using a magnesium oxide board, and they decided on option 2. And then in the next paragraph, 5.33, he says, just at the bottom of the screen there, the only changes between the first test and the second test that I was aware of was the thickening of the Marley Eternit panel from 8mm to 12mm and the use of a 6mm magnesium oxide board at the fire barrier at level 2 and at the top of the test rig. Does that sound right to you in terms of the changes that were made between the first and second test?
Yeah. Like I said, reading through the transcripts as the inquiry's gone on, I'd completely forgotten about the magnesium oxide board, but having mentioned it again, I do recall it now. But yeah, that is exactly how I remember it. Yes.
So from your perspective, the changes would have been you had different cladding boards to install.
Yes.
And there was also the layer of magnesium oxide, which you say you now recall.
Yeah.
We know from Celatex, I don't think we need to go to it, but if you want to, then let me know and we can. But we know that an 8mm board of the Marley Eternit was used over the magnesium oxide. Do you remember that?
No. If there was definitely a heavier board, 12mm. I think there might have been a 12mm board. No, I can't remember the exact configuration. No.
If there was a heavier board, does it follow that you also had a lighter board then?
No, it doesn't necessarily. No, I think the rig may have been, there's a heavy board lower, and then the magnesium oxide board was higher with the second fire barrier. So it may well have had a thinner panel because of the addition of the 6mm underneath it.
Do you remember installing cladding at that level, which was a different colour to the cladding that was lower down?
Only vaguely, but I do recall from having looked back through my own photographs that you should have on file there. But yeah, I do remember there was one board that was particularly heavy. It was really heavy.
And do you recall that there were you've said that you can remember from seeing photos that there were different colour boards. Do you remember those boards being thinner or lighter?
Yeah, I think one of them was orange. I think the orange one was the heavy board. I think that was with the 12mm, and the other one would have been the 8mm, I believe. Yeah.
I think we have the records the other way around, but I don't think we need to go into that. Could I ask about, again, where all of the materials were when you arrived? Were they all already on site?
I believe so. No, actually, no. I think that we was waiting for a delivery of some board.
Do you remember what?
No, I can't remember accurately, but I do remember having a delivery, accepting a delivery while we were there still.
Do you know if that was a delivery of the magnesium oxide board?
I can't say, accurately. It could have been that or the other panel. I don't recall.
You say you were waiting to take delivery of it. When whatever that was arrived, did you personally take delivery of it?
Well, we accepted delivery of it because we were waiting to install it. But yeah, no, the BRE obviously would have taken charge of it, and because it was their forklift offloaded it.
Okay. So your memory is you were waiting for something with the BRE forklift?
Say again, sorry.
So were you waiting with the BRE forklift?
Well, I'll say there was BRE staff around most of the time, so when anything arrived, somebody would come out and offload it.
I see. So when it arrived, is your memory that the forklift went off and offloaded it, and you would have then accepted delivery by signing for it or whatever?
I don't know if I would have signed for it. No, I probably would have accepted it. No.
Do you know who would have accepted it?
No, I can't recall who. Like I say, there was various members of staff. For I think there was probably about four different men of BRE around at any one point.
And were those all BRE employees rather than Celotex, as far as you know?
Yes.
And were you just waiting for this delivery, just waiting in the burn hall for it to arrive?
Yeah, I think we were really reinstating and reinstalling the system. I don't think we were standing around waiting, but I do recall expecting a delivery to arrive.
So you would have started installing the system whilst you were waiting, and then when the delivery turned up.
Yeah, I believe we would have been, although I can't quite recall, I think we would have been reinstating the substrate after the first test. I'm sure we would have been, taking away the previous test and reinstalling new aluminium rails and brackets. I would have thought that's what we would have been doing.
Do you remember how far you were into installing or setting up the installation when the new delivery arrived?
No.
Did you see any delivery notes for the materials that had already arrived?
No.
Would you have expected to?
Not in such a place, no.
Could I just ask you what you mean when you say not in such a place?
Because any deliveries were not specifically mine. They were either Celotex's or property of the BRE. If I was on a standard cladding job and I was the supervisor or the installer on the site, I would have been in charge of the property that had come. It would have been Simco's or whoever. So I would have taken the delivery of it in that case, but not in this particular case, no.
Was any explanation given to you about why that material was being delivered whilst you were on site?
No, it was just, I was aware that they changed it, and the way I understood it was that the first test had failed because the panel had failed before the Celotex product could be tested to the duration. So it made perfect sense to me to put a thicker panel on it so the Celotex being tested in question could be tested. So they just changed the panel. We were just waiting for the new panel to arrive. That was all.
Do you remember where you got that impression that it had failed because before the Celotex product could be tested?
Yes, John Roper.
John Roper.
Yeah, let's say that I did speak to who I think now is Phil Clark, not the main man at thing, but not so much. The information that I got from the whole thing at all was John Roper, because he was there overseeing. I spoke to him quite a bit when he was there.
And can you remember what else Mr. Roper told you? Was there anything else?
Not really. No, yeah, I'll say I'd ask him a general question, and he'd answer it. Lots of say, you know, I said how. I mean, obviously, I was intrigued as to why. You know, we're about there. You know, why did it fail, or how did it do? And he says it failed. And, you know, like I just said, it failed. The system burnt away. And I'll say it for myself because I think I uninstalled it. You know, it had burned. It had burned before. You know, the panel had failed before the product had been tested.
Did he explain to you what the changes were that they had made?
In so much as we were installing a thicker panel and to stop that happening again, which made perfect sense to me.
I'm going to move on to ask you a couple of questions about the installation process itself with that May test. We know that that was carried out on a Friday, which was the 2nd of May 2014. And Mr. Clark's told us in his evidence that normally the rig would need to be handed back a clear day beforehand. And for the record, that's at the transcript at day 96, page 11, lines 9 to 18. But I don't think we need to go to it. You can just take it from me. Do you remember if you were installing in the week running up to the 2nd of May?
I can't recall that, no.
Do you remember when you would have started?
No, I don't know. I'll say it's so long ago. I haven't gone back over. I might be able to find that information out, but off the top of my head, I really don't know that.
Is it right that you would carry out the installation in terms of putting the system up? Is that layer by layer?
Yes.
And how long did that take? Can you remember?
No, but I shouldn't imagine that it lasted any longer than 2 days, 3 days maximum, I would have thought.
Can you remember when in that window towards the beginning or towards the end, when would you have been installing the layer of the magnesium oxide?
Towards the end. If I recall, it was what, 2/3, 3/4 of the way up. So we would have started at the bottom, obviously started at the bottom sequentially and worked us way up. So it would have been towards the end of the process.
And how long would that, so if you start at the bottom, would that then have been visible until you put the next layer, until you got up to that level with the next layer? Right?
Yeah, but yes, but it. I think I can't quite recall, but I think there was only one panel of magnesium oxide. Whether there was one band that went around both sides of the test rig, or whether it was just on the large face, I can't recall. But it could have been visible for half an hour. It could have been visible for several hours. I really can't recall how long it was open for before we installed. We could have put the magnesium oxide panel on, and then installed the next panel straight over it. You know, so it could have been a matter of, you know, minute, 10, 15, 20 minutes. It could have been open for hours. I really can't recall that.
And were you given any instructions to try and ensure that it wasn't visible for very long?
No.
Were you given any suggestion or any instructions that it should be concealed from the BRE staff?
No. I will say I wouldn't have thought. No, there was definitely nothing. You would say underhanded that I could understand that was going on in that respect, and BRE staff could have seen it at any point in time. I mean, there were people everywhere all the time, so no, there was never any to hide anything or cover anything up. No.
How long? I think you said you think it was roughly 2, maybe 3 days. Is that the clearest memory you have of how long the installation would have taken?
Yes. Well, it's only 15 meters squared at the most, so that's, you know, and doing it as meticulously you can, you know, so it's got its best chance of achieving what it needs to. And nobody would want to pay any more than 2 days for it, so I shouldn't imagine it'd last any longer than that.
Do you remember seeing Mr. Clark or other BRE employees as you were carrying out the installation?
Not specifically. Look, no, I couldn't say as to what point in time they were there watching, but there were people around, but I couldn't specifically say at what point in time and and what stage of the install they were there recording. No, I couldn't say that.
Do you know when you handed the rig back to the BRE for testing?
I don't remember. If you're saying it was on a Friday, I should imagine it was 2:30.
And you told us earlier, I was going to ask you about the drawings or any drawings you had for that test. And we've talked already about the drawings you were provided with for the February test. Could we go back to Jonathan Roper's witness statement? That's CEL 3010052, page 13. Paragraph 3.5, so a bit further down, possibly onto page 14 actually. Yes, there we go. You can see 5.35. Mr. Roper says the team at Celotex had wanted Patrick Jones, so you, to construct the rig because Paul, Rob and I had decided we didn't want to pay for another set of drawings, and Patrick knew the system from the first test. We thought that Patrick could oversee the construction without the need for revised drawings. And Mr. Roper has told us orally that Celotex didn't get any new drawings commissioned before the test. Do you remember that you were not given any additional drawings in relation to the second test?
I can't specifically recall, but I would generally agree with that, because, as I said, it was very lax in that way. Not say that nobody gave me the drawings first. Nobody, there's no forethought or or confirmation of anything for. So I would guess that the first set of drawings, I would agree with that. That I did it exactly the same from the first one, because I know, I really do not think there was a second set of drawings. There's definitely not a set of drawings that showed 2 layers of panel, if that's the question. But no, I would agree. There was just the original set would have been all I would have worked from.
And given that we know there had been these changes to the design, did you think it was strange that there weren't any new drawings?
No.
How did you know to put up the magnesium oxide layer without the drawings there?
John Roper would have specifically told me what to do.
Just to be clear, you say he would have told you.
John Roper did tell me. Yeah, I wouldn't. Yes, if I didn't have a drawing, if I'd have had a drawing, my mind does work like that. If I'd have had a second drawing with the magnesium oxide, I'm sure I would have remembered it, but I didn't. And so, yeah, I was instructed by John Roper what boards to put on and how to put them on.
Did he give you those instructions when you were on site at the BRE?
Yes.
So they were verbal instructions?
Yes, John Roper was there. Like I say, he was there quite a lot to, overseeing and instructing the work. So yes.
Can you remember what he told you in terms of where those boards needed to be installed?
Looking back from context at the back of the photographs and what I recall from it, at the level of the second fire barrier.
But that's a memory that's an answer you put together, being as helpful as you can, but it's not a memory, is that right? Yes,
but also it goes logically that I wouldn't have guessed where to put them. I would have specifically been told where to put them. I wouldn't have chosen where to put them myself. I would have been told where to put them. I would have built the rig specifically as requested, and requested by, in this case, John Roper.
As far as you can remember, did anyone except John Roper give you any instructions about how to install, or the design that was to be installed?
No.
Did he give you any explanation about why the changes were being made, or just tell you what they were?
Only generally, as I said previously, that the first test had failed because the panel product in question in the first test had failed. It had burnt through before it reached before the test could conclude, so that where it failed, they put a thicker board on, or 2 layers of board. That's what I understood. And like I said, it made perfect sense to me that would be, I understood that it wasn't the panel product that was being tested, it was the Celotex underneath.
Ms. Sullivan, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but can I just try and clarify something with Mr. Jones? Mr. Jones, I envisage you putting up this test rig, and when you get to the cladding panels, you start at the bottom, I assume, and work on up. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Was Mr. Roper present when you were putting up these panels for the whole time, as far as you recall?
I believe he probably was. Yes.
You see, I can understand that if you had a drawing which showed where you should put the magnesium oxide boards, you would know exactly where to work to and where they should go. But without a drawing, how did it work?
There's obviously the original drawing showed that there was, I think, if I remember rightly, sort of 4 or 5 panels high.
Yeah.
First panel covered the first fire barrier. Second panel was intermediate, I believe. So the third panel would have been on the second fire barrier. So that would have been the level it was required. But I'm sure John Roper was there, though. I do recall him being there, and he must have been. Yes.
So your recollection is that he, in a sense, supervised the placing of that particular of the cladding at that particular level.
Yes. I don't recall. I really do not believe there was another drawing. I really do not.
No, I'm just trying to understand how it worked, because you would need some fairly precise instructions, either in the form of a drawing or in the form of oral instructions.
It would have been all. I mean, if there's 4 panels, third one from the bottom, the one that corresponds with the second fire barrier, will be the magnesium oxide. But I'm sure he was there at the time.
Right. And can you remember whether, having got the magnesium oxide board on, you immediately put on the outer board, the alternate board, or whether you worked on up the rig?
I really can't remember. We probably would have worked on up the rig, but I can't remember that in that detail.
No. All right. Thank you very much. That's very helpful. Sorry, Ms. Sullivan. On you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Jones, in relation to those instructions you were getting from Mr. Roper, do you remember anyone from the BRE being present when he was giving you those instructions?
Not anything specifically, but as I said previously, there were definitely people from the BRE around all the time. And I mean, sometimes John would be standing there talking to several people, of whom I assumed were BRE people. So yes, he was definitely talking to, BRE staff at intervals. At what particular time and what particular stage of the process, I couldn't clarify.
But as far as you remember, any verbal instructions given to you by Mr. Roper was a conversation between the two of you rather than with anyone from the BRE standing in as well?
I don't ever recall anyone from the BRE inputting on the specifics of how the test went. No, how the install went. Sorry, everything that I was asked to do. Yeah, it was from John Roper. No one from the BRE had any design input, not directly to myself anyway.
Could anyone have overheard the instructions he was giving you if they had wanted to?
Yeah, I would have thought so, yes.
And I think we've already discussed this, but just for sake of clarity, were you given any instructions to try and conceal the changes that were made to the design from the
No.
BRE?
No, definitely not. I was unaware of anything said underhanded or anything going on like that. There was no question of anything sinister occurring to me at the time, and no one suggested hurry up and get that on or cover that up or don't let anyone say that. There's nothing like that.
Mr. Chairman, I'm making quite good time with Ms. Jones, but I've
Good.
a few pages to go, so looking at the time might be a good point for a break.
Is that convenient to you?
Yes, I'm about to start a new topic.
Right. Well, Mr. Jones, I said that we would have a break during the afternoon, and we're going to have it now. All right. We will resume at 3:30, please. And I have to ask you, while we're having a break, please don't talk to anyone at all about your evidence or anything relating to it.
Understood? Yes.
All right. See you at 3:30 then.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Welcome back, everyone. We're now ready to continue hearing further evidence from Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones, are you there? Can you see me and hear me?
Yes, I can see you and hear you. Yes.
Very good. Thank you very much. And you're ready to carry on, I hope.
Yes.
Good. Thank you. In that case, Ms. Sullivan, when you're ready.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jones. Ms. Jones, we were talking before the break about what, if anything, you could remember about when the installation for the May test was carried out. And I think it's fair to say you don't have a clear memory. Could I ask you to look at CEL 50873 on page 2, if we get that document. And about halfway down that page, there's an email on the 11th of March from John Roper at Celotex to Graham Smith at Simco. And it says, have just come off the phone to the BRE, who have confirmed that work can commence on site from 7th of April. I'd envisage needing materials supplied by Simco and labour for 3 days, week commencing 7th of April. If you could just scroll up, please, to the email at the top of that page, we can see Mr. Smith's reply. John, as discussed yesterday, Pat should be available that week as the site is on or behind again. Does that prompt any memory from you about when you were there for the installation of the test carried out in May, or can you not remember?
No, I can't remember. No.
Thank you. And you told us that Siderise or someone from Siderise attended before the February test, you think, to tell you about their product. Was anyone there before at the May test as well, or was there only one such session?
No, there's only one visit. I really can't recall whether it was Siderise. I really can't recall. You know, I might be citing Siderise incorrectly there, but it was whoever was supplying that particular fire barrier, which is a Siderise style. You know, whoever it was, I really can't recall.
We're going to just look then at some questions about the BRE's involvement, which we partially discussed, but just to make sure we've covered everything. Can you remember, in relation to the May test, who from the BRE had oversight, or whether there was a person who had oversight as you were carrying out that installation?
I can't recall who that was, and like I said, I'm only assuming from context that it was Phil Clark, but I have got a terrible memory for names, and it would have been it was the same gentleman who I believe is Phil Clark. We don't say it's, you know, I don't know, it's for sure.
But whoever it was who was overseeing, it was the same person you remembered from February, is that right?
Yes.
And do you remember that person viewing or inspecting the rig as you were assembling it?
Not specifically, no.
Could we go to BRE 405773 at page 3? Just as it comes up, I'll just explain what this is. It's not a document that you have any input into. It's a document that's been disclosed to us by the BRE. And it's a document that was in existence from May 2013 onwards. Did you see anyone from the BRE with a document of this sort whilst you were assembling the rig in May 2014?
No, not specifically that document, no. As I've said numerous times, there were definitely people walking around measuring and checking and photographing and walking around with clipboards and looking at what we were doing at intervals during the whole time we were there. But I couldn't specifically say, you know, when and at what stage, you know, they were recording and reporting. But there were definitely people. But that particular form, I can't ever remember seeing that one now.
Do you remember anyone checking off against any sort of list or checklist?
It'd be conjecture. Definitely there were people checking stuff, and maybe against lists, maybe that one, but I would just be guessing.
And you say there were people checking and making,
BRE staff.
yes, were any of them, were there more than one person doing that?
I couldn't say. Again, I would just be assuming. There were definitely BRE staff, different members of staff, doing different things, but who into what exact detail, who was doing what, in that's their job. You know, I wasn't really paying that much attention at the time.
I see. Did any of them ask you any questions at any point?
Possibly.
Possibly, but you don't remember, or?
I did speak on several occasions to some of the BRE staff, but I don't think, looking down there, possibly on the thermocouple positions, that just specifics, nothing particular, nothing particular springs to mind. But I did have conversations with, lightly with BRE staff while I was installing.
Can you remember what sort of things you would have been talking about?
It would mainly been about their particular rig. As I said much earlier on, that they obviously that they have knowledge of their rig, and they would specifically tell me, we'll need to put we'll need to put the thermocoupler here and there, and fix to that, fix to this section. If you use steel, fix into this section. Exactly. Just things like that. Just general information on the rig itself. Nothing particular on the products they was installing. They had no design input and so, but just on the particulars of their rig and what was required on that score.
Did anyone ask any questions about why there were different coloured layers of board being installed? And do you ever, I know you told us you don't have a great memory for names, do you know if you ever met Stephen Howard whilst you were at the BRE?
Name doesn't ring a bell at all, no.
Ms. Sullivan, I'm sorry to interrupt you yet again, but can I just ask about photographs? Mr. Jones, we understand that various people took photographs of the rig in the course of construction.
Yes.
Were there times when you asked BRE to come and take a photograph?
No.
So whatever photographs they took them as and when they wanted to. Is that how it worked?
Yes. Yeah.
And did you take any photographs of the rig in the course of construction?
I did, yes.
And what happened to them?
I think you have copies of some of those. The ones that I took. There's some I took just as this is the stage we're at the moment, and
Yeah.
emailed them to John Roper. Other than that, they just stayed on my Google Photos, and that's where they've been ever since.
Okay, that's helpful. But do you think we've got them anyway?
Yes, anything that I found, information I thought might be helpful, I'm sure that I'll send them in.
Thank you very much. Yes, Ms. Sullivan. Sorry to interrupt you.
Thank you. Just for clarity, we do have photos from Mr. Jones, and we are coming to look at some of them a bit later. So just so Mr. Jones knows that they haven't got lost in transmission anywhere.
Okay.
Do you remember, we've spoken about photos, do you remember whether anyone from the BRE was taking any measurements at any point?
Specifically, no, but yes, they were definitely taking measurements. But of what? Of what? I couldn't specifically say. As I said, again, sorry, numerous times, there were definitely people from BRE who were recording and looking at things, during the build. Yeah, but specifically what they were measuring, I couldn't say. They were doing their work, and that's as much as it went.
Just to check I've understood that, is that you remember measurements being taken, but not specifically of what?
Yeah, they were measuring and recording several times and several intervals. They were looking at things. I didn't see them measuring thicknesses of panels. I didn't see them measuring. I didn't specifically see what they were measuring, but they were for sure recording the build as it progressed.
Were you asked at any point to identify all of the component parts that were going into the system?
No,
And were you aware of anyone from the BRE recording that information?
not specifically, no. I just assumed that everything that was done was recorded because that's their job.
And I think the chairman asked you earlier about the instructions that you were getting from Mr. Roper. Could you just help? How often during the installation being built up were you having conversations with Mr. Roper?
Usually in the morning, and he didn't really need to tell us any more than what we needed to know. He would instruct us. You know, it's not that detailed a thing. He would say, put this bit there, put that bit there, and then that would more or less be it. And he would come again and check that we were doing what he'd asked. And it's not really that deep a thing. If he told me once at 9 o'clock, then it'd be done. You know, he wouldn't have to keep talking about it all the day long.
Was he there all day, every day?
He was there quite a lot, but I can't remember. I don't think he was there every day, but he was there every other day, most days. I really can't remember, but he visited quite a bit, yes. He wasn't there every day, though.
And I know we've been talking about if you can remember how long it took, but can you remember if it was the case that Mr. Roper was there every other day or not each day? Were you there consecutive days, or do you think you did some days and then came back and did some more?
I think we did, but I really can't recall. It's that long ago. I'm only getting that from looking back over emails and lot similar to the one that you just said that I'd revisit. I really can't say for sure. I did think there was a break. You know, there was a break in the install, but I can't remember why. Whether I was busy or whether it wasn't ready or for whatever reason. But I do seem to vaguely recall that we didn't install in one hit, as it were.
Do you have any memory of what stage you would have been at when there was that break?
No.
Do you remember how long that was for?
No, sorry, I can't. I really couldn't say.
In terms of conversations whilst you were at the BRE, were you present at, or did you hear any conversations between Celotex and the BRE whilst you were installing the rig?
No. No, I didn't, because usually we're up in the air on a scaffold. No, I'm aware that they were talking together, but no, I didn't overhear. No, I didn't particularly overhear anything specific, no.
We've talked a bit about the processes that were followed and your memory of what checks were carried out. Was there any difference, as far as you can remember, between the process in February 2014 and the process in May 2014?
What, from the aspect of BRE?
Yes, in terms of the checks. And
not that I'm aware of, no. I didn't notice anything particularly different, no.
And no real differences in the way that those checks were done?
No, I didn't notice anything particularly different, no, at all.
And as with February, do you remember if you told anyone from the BRE when you had completed installing that you were done and it was ready for handover?
I do recall letting them know, but like I said, it maybe just out of courtesy or building security that we'd finished and that we were leaving the building, and we'd cleaned everything up. But as for a particular process and protocol, I really can't remember. I don't think I was given any instruction to let them know at certain intervals or stages But again, I may have done. I do remember going up to the office and saying we're leaving now or we're done, but I can't remember any set stage points having to inform on that.
Do you remember who was in the office when you went up to say that?
No, but look, there was sometimes there was nobody. Sometimes there was who I believe to be Phil, and sometimes there were several people in there, or 2 or 3 people.
And as far as you were aware, were any checks carried out once you'd announced that you were finished, but prior to testing?
Yeah, I think they come and checked it when we were done, or did the work that they needed to do when we done. I'll say that they, after we'd installed to a certain stage, they would come and install thermocouplers and sensors and readers, whatever they needed to do. So that happened obviously as soon as I'd finished.
Can you remember, in terms of when thermocouples were installed, was that after you had installed the magnesium oxide layer or before?
I can't recall that, no. I
Um,
thought it was before, because some of them they would have needed to check the face and the penetration through the insulation. I would have believed. I'm just guessing. Sorry.
and do you know who carried out that overall check before you left?
No, just BRE staff. I don't know who.
Let's see, and we've slightly covered this already, but just for the sake of the record, was it your understanding that the BRE and Celotex were both aware of the components in the test rig in May 2014?
Yes.
And as far as you were concerned, was there any reason that the BRE could not have identified the changes in the design, so the 6mm magnesium oxide and the 8mm of Marley Eternit?
It was clear for anybody to see at any stage, if that answers your question. Anyone with access into that fire hall, obviously BRE staff or invited participants, because sometimes the door was shut. It was clear at any stage for anyone to record anything. What they actually did see, I've got no idea. But it was there's nothing hidden, or it was clear for anyone to see at any point. So I should imagine that BRE would have seen it.
So could we put it this way, that as far as you're concerned, there was no reason to think that they were unaware of those differences?
Correct. Yeah.
I'm going to ask you some questions now about stripping down that test rig. So after the fire test had been carried out, if we could go to BRE 405548 at page 6. And you can see there, the second email down, it's an email from Mr. Roper to Mr. Clark on the 15th of May, so about 2 weeks after the test, and with the subject line, Monday the 19th. He says, Phil, I've spoken to Simco, who are struggling to carry out a strip down of the rig Thursday or Friday next week. If I instruct Patch, brackets installer, to strip down on Monday without me attending, would this be okay? And can we prevent as much as possible our competitors being in hall at that time? Patch, that's a reference to you, isn't it?
It is, yes.
Yeah. And the Monday that he's saying, if he instructed you to attend, that would be Monday the 19th of May. We know that you did attend on that date because you took some photos, which we're going to have a look at. But can I just ask first, do you think that was the first time that you were asked to go and strip down the rig, and the first date?
I can't recall. I would guess so, but I'm guessing. I don't know. I would guess so.
Do you remember, did you complete the strip down of the rig in one day?
I can't remember, but I certainly would have thought so. I mean, it's hours worth of work, if that. Yeah, so definitely I would have thought so, but I can't remember. But I would have thought usually yes, definitely in a day.
Do you remember, was it just you who went to do that, or did you have someone helping you?
I can't remember 100%, but I think it might have just been myself. I can't remember.
We're just looking again at that email. You can see just after the sentences we've been looking at, Mr. Roper goes on to say, also, would it be possible for you to, I think there's a word missing, but probably take a couple of images once the guys have removed the facade, so we have something on file which shows the installation below and above fire break. And then Mr. Clark's reply is just above that and says, hi John, this would be okay, and I'll push up a camera and get some good photos for the system coming down. Do you remember whether Mr. Clark, or a person who you thought had been Mr. Clark, was present on the 19th of May when you went to strip down?
Again, I would be surmising. I would think no. I would be guessing. I couldn't say whether he was or not. I would assume that he was, but again, it's just an assumption.
That's very clear, thank you. I should say Mr. Clark's evidence was that when he said in this email, I'll put a camera up, he meant that he would arrange it, not that he would be there himself. Do you remember when you went to strip down, was anyone from the BRE there?
Yeah, there must have been somebody there. No, I can't. Like I said, they were recording. I mean, that is their job. I mean, they are recording, and I do now saying that, I do remember cameras on tripods, but at what point in time, I really don't know.
When you say cameras on tripods, where would those be?
I just now I haven't seen that. I do remember a camera rig set up on a tripod. In what specific location, I don't know, but I do remember now that is how they set it up and record it. I think I might be thinking of a recording for the video evidence for the actual tests. I might be getting mixed up with that.
Were you present for the actual test?
No, I think that was one criteria. You were not allowed to be in to witness tests, I believe.
Do you know, when you say you remember cameras on tripods, how high do you remember those being?
Meter, 1200.
Judging by that email, it looks like Mr. Roper didn't go with you to the strip down. Did he give you any instructions before you went to take it all down?
I don't remember.
Can you remember if he gave or referred to in any way the magnesium oxide boards?
No, sorry. No, I don't recall any conversation from John. No, there's nothing specifically about anything. No, he didn't. I had no instructions specifically about, doing anything with anything in particular. No, I don't believe it. I don't believe I even spoke to him, but I have.
If you didn't speak to him, do you think you might have been told to go by Simco instead then?
Yes. Well, it's Simco I was working for, so I should have imagine at the time. This is why I vaguely recall that there was a break in it. I think I was busy on another job that was equally as critical. So yeah, it would have been Simco that requested more, presence there.
I'm just going to look at you with some of the photos you sent to Mr. Roper. If we could go, you actually sent a number of emails, but there's one I want to look at first. If we could go to CEL 50950. Oh, sorry, that's the photo, not the email. Could we go to CEL 50946, I think is the actual email. No, that's another photo. Okay, well, this is not the one I wanted to look at, but it is another email you sent out on that evening. CEL 50942, please. And that should just be coming up. There we go. And it's a blank message, but you can see, which is the important point, the date and the time that you sent it. And it's got the subject line BRE. And then attached to that email, and then another 2 emails, there are some photographs which you took. Given the time that you sent that, that one's just before 10 o'clock at night, I assume you were sending those when you'd finished and got back.
I would guess so, yeah. I got around to it, but yes.
Do you remember why you were sending them immediately after being there? Had you been asked to send them?
No, I think it's no. I don't believe that I was ever asked to send photos. I think I just did it because I'm kind. I think because John was there. I think it was just to. Well, I can't remember, but looking back through the emails when I was originally given the evidence, I think I was just informing him as to the state of thing. Because looking at that previous emails, because he wasn't there, it must have just been for his own information. I don't think I wasn't specifically asked by him to send photographs. I just did it.
Could we look at CEL 50947, which is the email I was initially trying to take you to via our tour of various photographs? This is the one which attaches the photos we're now going to look at. And again, this one's 10:05 and it just says John regards Patch. So it's the same position. You were just sending them because you thought it was for his information, really.
Yeah, for sure.
Could we look at, go back to CEL 50950, which is one of the photographs which was attached to this email. You can see in that photograph the white layer of magnesium oxide boards around the level 2 thermocouples and the top of the rig. Are those the magnesium oxide boards?
Yeah. Oh, well, I think so. I don't recall the one at the top being magnesium oxide board, but looking at that, it must have been. But yeah, I do remember the magnesium oxide board being at that second level there, the wider one.
So is it the case then that you have a clear memory of the magnesium oxide being put at the second level, but you don't remember the top so well?
No, I don't recall putting it there, but obviously I did. But yes.
Did you take this photo?
Yes, I think so.
And was there any reason particularly that you had taken a photo of this at this level of the board being stripped down?
No.
Do you know, you can see there's a man in a blue hard hat.
Yeah.
In what looks like it might be a cherry picker or something. Obviously it's not you if you were taking the photo. Do you know who that is?
Yeah, that was, now I've seen that. That was an assistant I took with me. Yeah.
Okay. And then there's another, it's not actually very easy to tell in this photo because their face has been redacted, but on the very right-hand side, coming down the steps, you can see somebody wearing a high-vis jacket.
Yeah.
And in the photo, they've got underneath the redacted face, they've got a red helmet on. Do you have any idea who that might be?
No.
Did you only have the one assistant with you, as you can remember?
Until I just seen that, I can't even remember. Yeah, there's a friend of mine called Richard. I'll say it's yeah. I couldn't remember doing that. He occasionally used to help me out. So again.
So there were the two of you, and then we've got a third person in this photograph. We know it's not John Roper because he wasn't there. Was there anyone from Celotex there with you?
I don't think so. No. I don't ever remember anyone from Celotex other than John Roper ever attending. I would have guessed that would be BRE staff, but it'd have to be. Like I say, Yeah, there have to be. There wouldn't have been three of us there for sure, for definitely. There would have been me and one other. I thought I'd strip that down on my own actually, but yeah.
Was there anyone?
Ms. Sullivan, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I seem to be doing it a lot, I'm afraid, but I'd just like to clarify something with Mr. Jones while we've got this picture up on the screen. Mr. Jones, we can see from that photograph that all the cladding, all the Marley Eternit cladding has been removed.
Yeah.
But none of the magnesium oxide. When you dismantle a rig of this kind, do you start at the top or the bottom?
I don't think it would. It wouldn't matter for dismantle.
Okay, but would you just work your way straight up or down the face of the rig, as the case may be?
Probably yes. I can't remember why. There's no specific reason why that's left there.
Well, that's what I was wondering. Whether first of all, whether you left those particular boards there for any reason.
No.
You can't remember if you did, why you did.
No, I don't know. There's no particular. Well, I would remember, but no, there's no particular reason why those boards are still left there.
Okay, and does the fact that the boards are left there when you're dismantling the rig tell you anything about the order in which the boards were put up when you were erecting the rig?
For install, I would definitely always start at the bottom for install, because once you've put the first one on, you've got something to rest the next one on. I mean, that's the simple mechanics of it. But if those boards were charred and burnt, which I can't remember, but if they were, well, I might have taken the most dangerous ones off first. You know, I might have taken the loosest ones off, which could have been the bottom, or it could have been any of them.
Yeah,
I could have started at the bottom and worked my way up, or the other way.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Anyway, sorry, Miss Sullivan, on you go.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Jones, I just want to look at a couple of the other photos you took with you, just to see if that helps you at all with what you were taking photos of and why in particular. Could we have a look at CEL 50946? You can see this is pretty similar to the photograph we've just been looking at. It's another one that you emailed Mr. Roper, but it's a bit.
I know why I've taken that, because it clearly shows the fire damage up to the fire barrier and then just smoke damage above it. I can see that's why I've taken it, but I don't know why I've stripped the other board off, unless we was chucking it in two different skips. I can't think. There's no specific reason, but I can't think why I've done it like that.
Could we look as well at CEL 50945? And that's a close-up, but again, it's showing that whiteboard. And I think there's an area of charring or soot damage at the bottom. Can you see that?
I can see that, yes.
Yeah. Again, could you help us with why you're taking photos of this?
It's not specifically the whiteboard. As I said, there was never any inference of anything suspicious or underhanded going on. That's not particularly a photograph of the whiteboard. It's just of the state of it, the whiteboard and the other as well, and the fire barrier behind it. I'll say it's not. Although it is a picture of the magnesium oxide board. It's not specifically the magnesium oxide board.
I mean, this photo, the other two photos obviously were photographs of the system from a bit more of a distance. This seems to have been taken quite close up. Would it have been taken at that level?
Yes, it would have. Yeah, I would have only taken it on my telephone, but that clearly shows the smoke damage below and above the fire barrier, which I believe to be sidewise. Yeah, but that's why I've taken that, because it's clean one side and so effective, in my opinion.
Could we go back to the email we were looking at from Mr. Roper to Mr. Clark, which was BRE 405548 at page 6?
Sorry, are these photographs, these are not photographs that I would have sent to John Roper, or are they? I'll say I don't think I would have sent that particular one. I think that's just from my own file.
Yes, these are attached to.
Is it?
This
Okay.
one's attached to. If you'd like to see the email, this one's attached to. It's at CEL 50944, please. I think the emails are just blank, so I'm afraid you'll have to take it on trust from me. But they are all the emails and the photos belong together.
Yeah. Okay.
You can see. So that's the one that attached that, and the other two belong to the email we looked at that said John regards Patch.
Okay.
If we go back to the email exchange from with Mr. Roper and Mr. Clark at BRE 405548, you can see there at the bottom of Mr. Roper's email, he says he's asking Mr. Clark about getting some images which shows the installation above and below the fire break. Do you recall if Mr. Roper made a similar request to you at any stage?
Looking at those photos, maybe, but I don't recall it. I don't recall him. Oh, I don't. No, the answer is I don't recall him ever requesting me to take photographs. I was just trying to look see if I was copied in on that. I was wondering why, but no, I just think I just did it because it's just stage.
Does it follow, given we've looked at a photo which was taken by you of the full tested rig system showing those whiteboards,
yeah,
also a close-up at the same level, that you must have got down from dismantling it, taken a photo, and then gone back up, or the other way around, but you varied in level as those photos were taken, is that right?
Yeah, I was stood on the floor for the other ones. I must have been, so yeah, I must have been the second one where you've got the fire barrier and the whiteboard removed. I would have guessed that was during the on-install.
Do you know how long you spent taking these photographs?
Seconds, minutes.
We've got a copy of the photograph I showed you, which had your friend Richard and somebody else, but redacted. But we have apparently a copy which has their helmet not redacted. So if we could go to that, that is at CEL 3010626. And you can just see on the right hand there on the stairs, you may need your glasses, it's not terribly good quality, I'm afraid. There's a man in a red helmet.
Oh,
you can see his helmet. And
it is blurry, but I do recall him as being one of the well, I believe it was one of the BRE technicians that installed that worked there.
What did you understand his role to be, sorry?
One of the BRE staff, one of the ones who was about, installing the thermocouplers and I don't actually know what his role was, but I believe that man, quite a big man, tall man, dark hair, and I think that's him.
Do you remember him? Do you remember anyone else from the BRE being there, or do you not have that clear memory?
No, and I was saying those people. Several. There was a younger man as well. There was around quite a bit, and I can't recall. There was a younger guy. There's a guy with glasses as well, I think, but I don't know. No, at what particular stages they were around doing their work all over the place all the time. Like I said, they were around doing things a lot.
Can I take you to the final test report, which is BRE 402497 at page 29. This is a photograph which made its way into the final test report, but which is not one of the ones which you sent to Mr. Roper. Obviously, that whiteboard is still partly there. Do you remember BRE staff taking photos as you were dismantling that whiteboard? I think that's your friend Richard in there.
Yeah, no, I don't recall anyone taking photographs at any specific interval, but I am aware that they were taking photographs as and when they deemed necessary. I'll say that it was available. It was available to be seen and photographed at any point in time. So, and they were doing such. But specifics, no. I'm just wondering if whether I was requested to take it down in that manner so that they could. Although, again, I'm just guessing.
You can't remember any specific request like that?
No.
Apart from you and BRE staff, was there anybody else in attendance who was taking photographs?
I don't remember. I don't think so, but there could have been. I don't know.
Did anyone at the BRE ask you about that whiteboard whilst you were dismantling the rig?
I don't specifically remember. No.
Thank you. I'm coming to my last topic, which I can take fairly quickly. We know from Celotex that there were some revised drawings issued after the second test, which were then sent over. Were you asked to check those drawings at any point?
I don't ever remember. No, I might have been, but I don't remember. I don't think so, shall I say. I don't think so. I don't recall.
Those drawings were sent to the BRE in July 2014. One of the changes which we can look at, if we could get up side by side CEL 403194 and CEL 403201. Sorry, we may need to zoom in actually. On the top left-hand corner photo diagrams of both. It's very small here, so you may not be able to see, but there is a, thank you, that's very helpful. Can you see on the left-hand side of the screen now, about halfway across, there's a red screw going vertically, and the same, it's on a line with aluminium continuous rail.
Yes.
And then there's no text next to that red screw on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, which is the revised version, there's a very small number 10 next to the red vertical screw.
Yeah, I could see that, yes.
Yeah, and that is the introduction of a 10mm vertical joint running through the system. Can you recall what the width of the ventilation gaps were in the rig?
No.
But presumably, since the only drawings which were actually available to you were the original ones, which are the ones on the left which don't show the gap, you wouldn't have built that in.
No, but if generally standard is the ventilation expansion gap is the same as the width of the panel. So if that was an 8mm panel, it would have been a minimum of an 8mm gap or 8mm joint, I would guess.
If we could go to the transcript for day 72, page 3.
other than that, I can't really recall.
If we look from line 16, this is Mr. Roper giving evidence, and at line 16 he was asked, did you instruct Patrick Jones or Patch Jones to construct the panels with very small under 10mm gaps? And he said yes. And then he went on to say, lines 21 to 24, we had a discussion, I didn't fully understand the ventilation requirements, but I think Patch sort of indicated that you don't necessarily need a 10 or 12mm gap. And yes, it's that with the concept of trying to over-engineer. Do you remember any conversation along those lines about the ventilation gap?
Not really. Vaguely, vaguely looking at that, probably the same thing. Not specifically, but I've got a vague recollection of.
Do you think vaguely you would have said what you just said to us, that the minimum would be
Yeah, I don't think it would have been any less than it wouldn't have been any less than the thickness of the panel, unless I was instructed to do that. But I can't remember what it was. Generally, it would be 10mm, or the panel that you're using, because if you've got a piece of 8mm panel and the gap's supposed to be 8mm, you can cut a piece of that panel off and use the panel as the gap, if you understand what I mean. And a 10mm packers are readily available, which is a standard sort of a gap. So I wouldn't have thought it'd been a smaller gap than that, unless I was specifically asked to do that. But I can't remember putting a smaller gap in for any reason.
Did any of the conversations you had with Mr. Roper when you were installing the two tests or otherwise touch on this idea that Celotex were over-engineering the rig?
No, sorry, no.
And did you form any view that Celotex were attempting to do that in order to secure a pass for their second test?
No. What they, for the second test, what I said before, what they were doing, putting it, well, two panels, I don't know what is, but sorry, putting a thicker panel at that point made perfect sense to me, because it wasn't the panel that was being tested, is the way I understood it. So no, I didn't think there was anything wrong with what they were doing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jones. Mr. Chairman and members of the panel, that's the end of our prepared questions. Might we take a break just to see if there are any further questions from anyone following?
Yes, certainly. Just before we do, Mr. Jones, what happens to all the materials after the test rig has been dismantled?
There are skips or stillages, and we dismantle it into the skips, and then BRE tip it into a larger one, I believe.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. Right. Well, Council's reached the end of the questions that she has. She thinks she wants to put to you, but we always have a break at this stage so that she can just make sure nothing's been left out, and also to allow others who are not as directly involved to suggest questions which perhaps we might put to you. So we're going to have a break now. We'll come back at 4:30 and see if there are any more questions for you. And in the meantime, please don't talk to anyone about your evidence while we're out. All right?
Yep, of course.
See you at 4:30 then, please. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Well, welcome back, everybody. We're now going to see if there are any more questions for Mr. Jones. I'll just check that he can see and hear me all right. You there, Mr. Jones?
I am, yes, I can hear you and see you, yes.
Good, thank you very much. Well, we'll now find out whether Ms. Sullivan has any more questions for you, if you're ready to go on. Yes, Ms. Sullivan.
Thank you. I'm afraid just a couple. Could we look at CEL 50780? Mr. Jones, this is a method statement prepared by Simco, which was then sent to the BRE in advance of the February test. Did you ever see this method statement?
I don't recall, possibly. I can't remember. It's standard procedure that I would see the method statement and the risk assessments before I start any work. I don't recall it, but it is standard procedure, so I may well have done.
Do you remember seeing any other method statements other than this one?
No, I can't remember at all.
Thank you. A couple of questions just about the photographs you took. I think you said you think you would have been taking them on your mobile phone. Is that right?
Yes.
Would those have a date stamp on them? Time and date?
Well, I found those photographs because they're in, I'm sure they'd be dated. I don't think they'll have a date stamp. Sorry, I don't think they'll have a timestamp on them or anything, but they're in my Google Photos. That's where I found them from. So they are dated.
Do you still have them in your Google Photos, do you know?
I think so, yes.
Well, we may come back to you by letter about that.
Yeah.
But thank you, we know you've already provided them and we have got them. The final question, no, sorry, the last but one question. Did you keep a diary or a calendar at the time showing your work commitments?
No, I'm very lax like that. I possibly have got records. I did used to keep a diary, but I didn't keep it up. I did in the first break. I did run out into the garage and have a rummage through, but I couldn't find one. I may well have a record of the times, but no, possibly no.
Thank you. Final question then, actually final this time. Did you have any involvement? We've spoken about the cavity barriers and someone from Sidewise maybe. Did you have any involvement in the design of where those were put in the system?
No, I was just instructed as to what to build and I built it. No, they just say, please can you build this in this particular manner? And I'll just do that. No, I didn't have any input in the the location or no design input.
Thank you. Well, Mr. Chairman, those are actually all of my questions, and I should just thank Mr. Jones for having come to assist us. It's really very much appreciated.
Yes, well, thank you very much, Ms. Sullivan. Well, Mr. Jones, it's right that I should thank you on behalf of the panel for making yourself available to give evidence. It's been very useful to us to hear what you have to say, and we're very grateful to you for, as I say, making yourself available. And that's all the questions we have for you.
Okay.
And now it's all over. So thank you very much and good luck.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
And I think we're going to be sent on our different ways when someone gets around to pressing the buttons.